Okay, hi, I'm Jules,
And I'm Sarah.
and we're presenting on Moot speaking style today. Credit also goes out to Brooklyn Rogers, who helped us make this PowerPoint. We love you, Brooklyn, tremendously.
Okay, so just to start this off, I'm going to say just what the timing structure is of moot court. If you've never been in a moot court round, they take about 40 minutes. It's 20 minutes are allotted to each team. When you are on the side of the petitioner, you have your argumentation, and after the respondent, you'll have a rebuttal. So you'll get 20 minutes total, which, if depending on how long you're going to take for your rebuttal, either 2 or 3 minutes, you're going to take either 7 or 8 minutes, 9 or 8 minutes to complete your petitioner, both issue one and issue two. And then respondent, you'll take the full 10 minutes.
So, yeah, obviously, with just like 9 minutes to present basically your entire case, the stakes are a little bit high. So, we've got some tips on like how to time yourself. And the first one is pauses are great. So, like short pauses, they're not a sign that you like don't understand the material, you didn't catch the question. Like it shows confidence because you're demonstrating that you're going to think that over and then give them this like well thought out, concise response. Next, making your points is like the most important part. And by making your points, we mean getting in those like the thematic elements that you really need to cite, the cases, like making sure that you're tying a specific case fact from one that you're referencing right into this one, demonstrating why, whatever connection that you need to make is obvious and making sure you don't drag it out. I mean, it's really easy, I think, in rounds to just talk for like a while and rabbit hole. And you want to avoid that and be sure to just like get in and speak it clearly. Next, hitting time. So obviously some people ramble, like I myself guilty. But if you're not talking enough and you don't even get to 7 minutes, you're automatically disqualified. So you must speak for 7 minutes or you're automatically disqualified. And you always want to be hitting your time. Even if that means just like talking about a random case that you remember and then trying to tie some case facts back. Anything that you need to do to make time, essential. Next, the 30-second mark. When you see that signal, this means that you have 30 seconds left on the clock and it is time to sprint. Start running. Conclude your argument as quick as possible because if you go over time, you're going to get penalized and you don't want to lose points. Like you should always be able to be done before that timer goes off. Next is finishing strong. So like confidence is key obviously throughout, but like if you're getting peppered with questions the entire time, the judges kind of know there's heat on you and just make sure that at the end you're able to pull it back together, really demonstrate your main points, what you were trying to prove and just like walk out of there with head held high. If you can do that, like 9 times out of 10 they're going to love you and think that you're the best ever just because you showed like some modicum of confidence. And then finally, there's like never enough time to say all the things you want to say. And that's okay. Just like take it slow, go for clarity, try to hit like your two, maybe three major points, and you've done good enough.
Yeah, this is perfect. I did want to also add, with respect to hitting your time and being under time, it's actually, you will not get the same amount of points if you do not make 10 minutes. So you should be cognizant of how long you're taking to speak and using all of the time that you have allotted to be able to convince your audience. Because if you get to the end of your argument and you haven't spoken for 10 minutes and they feel unconvinced, they will assume that you should have taken that extra time to convince them more. So, like Juliana said, confidence is key here. Like, fake it till you make it. And also, this has to do with preparation, but there's a lot of things in moot court you cannot prepare for. That's basically the questions that you're going to be asked by your justices. So, one of the ways you can prepare is, of course, running a million times. Each time you run, it's going to be different, especially if you have an audience who's going to ask you questions. This will help you get familiar with your case, as well as little more concise spoken versions of your points that you need to make when you get cut off by questions and things like that. You'll be able to develop those down pat. And also you'll be able to start anticipating questions that you're going to be asked and get your answers down before those questions are asked in an actual round. So faking it till you make it is the most important thing about moot court, I have to say, because there's a lot of people who will, speak, and because they are nervous, they're, even if they come up with the best words possible, they're just not as convincing. It's just simply, that's the fact. Anyone, you want to be able to like make direct eye contact with the judges and connect with them as you're giving them these points. And this all takes confidence. And it's not difficult to do this. So it's very difficult to do this. So things that you can use to help you fake it till you make it is taking your comfortable pauses when you feel like you get there. If you don't, taking pauses intentionally is great because it will keep you from using filler words and things like that. So constantly be taking pauses, especially if you're feeling heightened. Take a deep breath and just continue. That's the way to go about things confidently. Don't raise your eyebrows. Be facially calm, especially if they get you on a really hard question, because sometimes they will just try to be grilling you. And if you react in a way that lets them know that they've, got you cornered, then it won't turn out the same way. And it can be a self-perpetuating cycle of, getting questions and getting nervous and then going back to your points and then getting a question and getting nervous again. So try to keep yourself calm throughout this whole thing.
Okay, so physical composure, it's obviously a huge aspect of your argument because you're going to be presenting in person. As you're standing in front of the judge and like moving around the room, it's really important that you're aware of kind of your presence and what you're actually doing. So for starters, the good, a neutral expression is essential, or like a happy, like a smile, even when you're not presenting. So like I have been sitting in a round before, and at the end of the round, a judge will be like, yeah, you guys were making stink faces while your opponents were going, or like calling out an opponent and saying like, hey, when you were passing notes to each other, like I didn't like the way that your face looked. They can just say that to you and take points off. So maintain a neutral expression constantly. Like decorum, if you have if you've ever had an introduction to like the laws of decorum, essentially it's just how you conduct yourself, and those laws apply everywhere, especially in a moot courtroom in front of judges, or like law students pretending to be judges, whatever. So after a neutral expression, you also want to have good posture. So confidence really comes from like how you hold yourself. If you're slouching, or if you're kind of like drawing inwards a little bit, um even just like leaning your hand, or like leaning your head on your hand on the table as you're taking notes, none of those are necessarily a sign of good posture. You want to have shoulders back, like back straight, head up, show that you consider yourself to be someone worth respecting. That's why you have good posture, and they should respect you as a consequence of that. Okay, next, so what not to do. Hand movements are great, right? Like I've been moving my hand the entire time I'm talking, but not in the courtroom. Your hands should be seated neatly, like on top of each other on the podium, maybe holding the podium. And the next key is like, you don't really want to rely on objects. When people get nervous, it's a really common, like bad habit, I guess, to like mess with your hands. Like we've all seen the kid in class flipping a pencil over and over, right? You can't do that, and especially not in front of the judges, especially while you're not presenting. You shouldn't be like picking at your padfolio. You shouldn't be looking down and referencing it. That's like another huge thing, and we'll kind of get to that later. But one of the reasons you want to run your argument as many times as possible is so you remember it and you don't have to look down at your padfolio and be like, where was I? Like, what case am I forgetting? If you can learn to not rely on objects and to just literally maintain that constant connection with judges for the duration of your argument, you're set. And that's going to get you like great points when they're judging you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this little posture portion. You guys can't tell, but I'm 6 feet tall and I'm a woman. Most of the time when I come into a room, the podium will be too low for me and anybody who is taller than me. If that situation happens, you can't, most of the time you can't change the actual height of the podium, but if you can, please do so. Otherwise, you should put your hands on the podium. This way you will like be anchored to the podium and you won't look so out of place, you know, towering over whatever podium they set up for you. But yeah, hold the podium and make it a part of your posture if you're very tall like me.
Okay, great. So, being unconventional, why is this like the number one piece of advice you're going to get from for pretty much like anyone that does moot court? Because if you want to get recognized, if you want to stand out, you have to be unconventional. You have to stand out. So, yeah, it's really important to know that like you are not going to really get any major recognition if you're not super flashy in your presentation and like really methodical. And that doesn't mean that you have to have like a certain personality type to get this. It's just that there are certain things you can do to really elevate your argument and leave like a lasting impression on the judges. So, step 1, having a central theme. This works really well because on any like really tough question or kind of like a lull in the argument, you can always refer back to this theme. And when you refer back to this theme, you're strengthening your argument because you're showing that you really were able to take all of these, like in the labyrinth of constitutional law, you were able to grab all of the like relevant specs and put them into a convincing picture. Step 2, telling descriptive stories with characters. So, it's kind of like theater. The first time that I ever like ran a moot court argument, some like I don't remember who, but it was some mentor that was like, you guys should try to think of it really like you're acting, like you're putting on a show. And part of that is really having fun with these stories that they give us. Like the descriptive stories, that's pretty much handed to you if you actually like read the case, that's handed to you when they're throwing in all these like juicy details and like, oh my gosh, this character did this and da 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 da. They want you to incorporate that. So really like be descriptive when you're trying to explain the case facts. You don't have to be so technical. And sometimes it's good to even like bring in character names. Like in the 2021 case, or no, the 2020 case, Mrs. Z was like a major character, the woman getting married and then she's like, denied her wedding invitations because of her sexual orientation. That's a compelling story. Use it to your advantage. Step 3 is emphasizing the far-reaching implications. So you never want to really like constrain only to your case. It's all like obviously there are 2 different types of cases, one of which is more common where you're only really talking about your case. You're not saying that the law is unconstitutional on its face, which is prima facie, I think. I don't know. But anyway, you want to show that whatever judgment the judges do end up siding with, which preferably would be yours, right? It's going to have long lasting implications. So let's pull it back to our step 1, having that central theme. Say that we had this theme of religious freedom, right? I'm arguing for religious freedom. I'm saying if you rule in my favor, you're protecting religious freedom. That has a huge implication. Like the Supreme Court's judgments don't often get overturned. This is going to be for decades this incredible bastion of religious protections and like securing the rights of our people is guaranteed by the Constitution. Don't be afraid to fluff it up. They love that, and it really plays into this whole pick me, like why my argument is so much better. All right, and then the final step, don't shy away from big bold language. I also like kind of want to add to that, don't shy away from like casual language, like layman's terms. There's nothing wrong with layman's terms as long as you also can like throw in that right vocab word when they want it. So yeah, I actually once went up against these really polished, like this really polished team. They had an incredible, like I thought was a really well put together, like incredible argument. And when they were done, the judges said that it actually seemed like way too rehearsed and way too stuffy. They were like, normal people don't talk like that. Like that was not a conversation. So don't be afraid to say, this is like this is super wrong, like they're not super wrong, but like, this is extraordinarily inappropriate. Those words are gonna, obviously trigger some kind of reaction from the judges, but that's not a bad thing. Like you want them to react.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to this. I hope this speaks to you in a way that shows what's conventional in moot court. I was in a round and with Juliana, who was my partner last year, and she got a huge compliment from a justice who was incredibly impressed that she started her argument with a smile. And I just wanted to say that because most people are very nervous or like look, you're visually nervous. and showing and just connecting with the judges on that little level, like right before you start your argument, just kind of giving them a smile is an invitation for them to participate in your argument. And so that's one of the ways that Juliana is a little bit unconventional, but absolutely incredible at moot court. Jules is definitely very qualified to say this because she has gotten not one speaker award, but 2 speaker awards. Okay, so responses to questions. I have to say that this is probably where you are able to rack up the most points. If you go back to the PowerPoint and YouTube video we did on how moot court is scored, everything has to do with you displaying your knowledge, and this is a whole category, responding to questions, but also displaying your knowledge are categories, and you do that specifically through responses to questions, because you can rehearse things and say them, but when you come up with cites in the responses to your questions, you prove that you know about this case. So I just want to go into some key aspects of responses. Sometimes justices will really ask you a very hard question, so you can stay calm, you can take a breath, you can look up for recall. These things are all fine, so don't worry, because they're expecting that they're asking you something new that you haven't thought about, even if you have thought about almost every other question that all the justices will ask. Someone will get you. Excessive passion is not really necessary in these responses, because a justice is on a certain wavelength when they're asking you these questions. You can match their energy, but you can also be passionate if they're asserting something to you would have an implication, to you and your argument would have a bad implication. That's where you can bring in some passion, but you want to be very concise and clear with these responses and avoid making it emotional at all. Actually answer the question that the judge asks you. You cannot avoid a question. I have said this before, but if you avoid a question or don't answer it in the way that the justice will once, they will just ask you again, and that will indicate to the other judges that they didn't get the answer that they wanted, and so the other judges will dock you points, and not just the one judge who asked the question that you didn't truly answer. So you want to be able to use these questions, even though they're an interruption to your argument. You want to be able to use these questions in order to flow back into your argument. So one of the ways of doing this is to just point out the implication of the question that they're asking is a good way to do that. So responding to your judges, that you need to use a lot of deference when you're responding to judges.
Yeah, I think deference actually is like a super important point that we don't like explicitly say here, but we're talking about it now. So when you respond to a judge, like one of the worst tones that they can pick up is pompousness or like self-righteousness, or like thinking that you absolutely and totally like know the answer to this question or almost offended by that question. You need to display like the most extreme levels of respect you've ever had in the courtroom. Like you are humbled by every question that they ask. You appreciate it because it is an opportunity that they've given you to explain yourself. Do not frame the questions as like you schooling the judge. Assume the judge is like an all-powerful being that literally knows everything because they've gone to law school and you have not. Like it should seriously, like it should be very simple, but it's sometimes hard to remember that, especially if you see these questions as attacks, or you're like, wait a minute, my argument suddenly looks terrible when they ask that question. Like, why would they ask me that? Take it in stride, stay respectful. Any other behavior will get point stopped. Like simple as that.
Yeah, I will say that even if you know the question, the question that they're going to ask, you won't know them beforehand, but we'll have a question bank. We'll come up as a group with a lot of questions that they could possibly ask. You get asked the same question, pretend like you're thinking about it, pretend like you come up with a nice, calm, eloquent answer. These things are the performativeness of moot court, which is what gets your judges engaged with you.
And also to the performativeness, if you don't know how to control your face, or you're like, oh my god, like I'm not going to be able to hide the fear when I get that question, my tip that Sarah kind of touched on earlier, just constantly smile. Like literally just stand up there like I don't care how ridiculous it looks. If you're smiling, they're not gonna think you're scared or stressed or worried or like angry or offended, anything. They're
Yeah.
just seeing the smile.
I switch instantly into a different mode when I start getting asked a question, because that's the time in which, first of all, you get to breathe during your argument. But I lean forward and start smiling and nodding my head. This is just my mental cue to, like, keep yourself snatched, but also it gets the justice knowing that you're engaged with their question and that you're ready and excited to answer their question, help them understand your argument. It just makes it more of a dialogue. When you are bringing up things that your opponents have said, you can respond to things that your opponents have said, specifically in the respondent argument. When you're doing that, you want to be very calm and prove that your argument is better. Don't, like, ad hominem bash your opponent. That will not help you at all. Same thing goes for rebuttal. You'll say in rebuttal, opposing counsel brought up these points, and the implications of their points are more far-reaching than the court can handle, and just show why. You don't have to say, like, they're wrong or something like that. You can just show that your argument is better and that the respondent's points were weak. Okay, self-calming. I feel like I'm an expert on this because I am so nervous, guys. I'm so nervous all the time. And this, like, I have to take my anxiety medicine before I go on a moot court battle. So you will be grilled. This is a high stress situation. You don't even know, some of the rounds you won't know whether you're doing petitioner or respondent before you enter. Sometimes you have to flip a coin. It just depends. You could get justices that are actual judges, or, like, if you're in an end round, you could get somebody who's like a federal judge, who's on the federal bench or on the state bench for Texas. This can
Also with like the law school students, if it's a final round and they're bored, they will mess with you and they don't care. And they're like, I'll score them fairly, whatever. And they'll just literally like, if you hear the term hot panel, it means that they're literally on fire with questions. Like, you do not get time to talk, you don't get time to breathe. They're just throwing that at you. So yeah, you gotta be prepared. You gotta be ready.
Yeah, so some of the solutions that I've come up with for self-calming is really grounding techniques when you're seated and you're about to go up to the podium. It really helps to, feel your feet on the floor. Just think about your surroundings. You want to take the whole stress of the situation out of your mind, because however you're going to do is however you're going to do. It's arbitrary once you get into the room. We don't care. If you suck, you wouldn't suck, but if you did, we wouldn't care. It's okay. So this can be done at the podium by holding the podium. Sometimes I hold my hands behind my back and I hold myself like this, which to me is a little bit calming. There's a lot of different things you can do. Like sometimes I tap, but especially when I start an argument, I close my eyes and I take a deep breath in and out, and then I open my eyes and I address the justices. I've gotten so many compliments on this. I don't know exactly why everyone is so kind of obsessed with this, but that's how it's what leads you into, like, the smile and just looking at the justices and saying, "May it please the court," which is obviously our favorite thing to do because it sounds badass and it's the easiest thing to remember. When you are in a round, when you're getting a question, practice good, positive self-talk, especially when you're practicing too. You need to be kind to yourself, especially as you're learning this stuff. There is a learning curve involved with this. And thank you.
With the I would.
Thank you. There is a learning curve involved with this. So just think about where you're going and maybe where you've been, and not how you think you're doing in the moment, because you don't actually know until you get into a competition.
I'll also say, like, going back to that slide a little bit earlier that said like perfect practice makes perfect. If you are being mean to yourself while you practice and it's like game day, you're going up, you're not suddenly going to be able to snap into a positive mentality. Like you really should be practicing that positivity, really throughout the duration of your practice, your preparation, and then your actual performance. You're going to get there by being kind to yourself and saying, if you mess up a case, not that big of a deal. If you mess up a year, not that big of a deal. A name, a fact, a page number, like it's okay. And if you continue to use that positivity to redirect, you'll find that you're actually performing way better as you continue.
Yeah, and I
So
will add that I think this is an obligation you also have to your partner. Sometimes we need somebody to like get us off our little, I messed up so bad and the justices noticed. Like your partner, you as a partner should tell your partner, like, no, it was fine. You did great. I thought that was fantastic. It doesn't matter what happened. You just should be hyping up your partner. You should be supporting each other. This is how it makes this whole thing a little bit easier and definitely a lot more enjoyable to do.
okay, so let's talk about flow. Now, if anyone has ever done debate before, like any kind of public speaking, you might be familiar with flow. It's that state you get into when you're really just in your element, like at the top of your game, going for it, basically. And it's really tough to get into flow when you're constantly getting interrupted. This is why when you're telling stories and someone is constantly butting in, it's annoying, right? So with constant interruptions, they will try to throw you off. They will try to throw you bones. These can be attacks, these can be genuine, and no matter what, you won't present uninterrupted. So, by throw you bones, the judges might sometimes pick up on something that you are talking about and literally, like, I mean, they get a packet every year that tells them what questions to ask. They might literally be like, oh, this is a great time for me to ask that question, see how well they do, and might throw it at you. Don't see that as an attack, right? You're not going to be able, you're never going to be able to get through an argument with no questions asked. If that happens, something went wrong. Like it was a lay judge that didn't understand how moot court worked, or like literally something went wrong. So be ready to have these constant interruptions, and instead of taking it as an attack, you want to make it conversational. So flow with them. Do not be afraid to challenge them. It's a back and forth, like constantly. You're always going to have this back and forth. And if they introduce something that seems to blow your argument up on its face, actively disagree with them. There's no need to say yes, judge. You can say no, judge, or like no, your honor, I don't agree with that. It's perfectly fine because that's what they're expecting. That's the point of this. They are calling you out and you are defending, saying, actually, you're seeing it the wrong way. Allow me to introduce you to this interpretation. And yeah, if you can keep that up, you're going to do great in moot court. This is also why when you practice, you should practice with questions. Like practice with a family member or a friend who will read these questions out to you as you're going along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is just our final review. So what this is, you will start to realize what looks effective and what doesn't look, sleek once you start practicing your arguments in rounds, which we'll do amongst ourselves and with A&M. But the whole thing to keep in mind is that you want to just be confident, tell yourself you're doing a great job, even if that is maybe not the total case, and just really have fun with this, have an engaging conversation with the judges, and hopefully by the end of the round, you will have learned something. Just a little note of hope. I personally was a terrible speaker before I started this whole thing. I've been competing in moot court this will be my 4th season. My first season in moot court, I placed last at a tournament, like actually dead last. And I've gone on to win a speaker award. So it's going to be okay if you don't get this down immediately. But when you come off as confident, you're only building yourself for the next time around. It doesn't really matter how you do in the round, but you want to make sure that you're building yourself and you're building on your knowledge, building on your confidence as a speaker, because that's the whole reason we're doing this, is so you can learn cases and be confident speaker for law school.
All right, thanks guys.